continue supporting you and working on the PEPs. So we'll be getting there towards the end. And just to get started, I'd like to go quickly through what we'll be looking at today. I hope you can see the agenda. So I wanted to do a quick little check-in, and in a second I'd actually like to, I don't know if my voice will hold up for an entire hour, but I definitely would like to hear whoever's joined, hear your voice quickly and just hear a little bit about how you're doing. So we'll do a quick little check-in, and then we'll talk a little bit about previous experiences with lesson planning. We'll talk about some components, key components for lesson planning, different strategies, and then looking at different potential layouts for lesson planning that go beyond just using a grid or a chart. And then some, if we have time, we'll talk a little bit more about how the things that we do to prepare for lesson planning. And then, of course, PEPs. So why don't we just start with seeing who's with us right now. So I don't know if you guys would like to just quickly turn your mic on, and then just say your name, tell us a little bit about how you're doing and anything new that's been going on for you since the last webinar that you had with Mary, anything that you've been able to put into practice from the last webinar, from our training. So maybe just a brief little minute introduction from each of you just to hear your voice. Is that okay? So maybe I can, Franklin, if you, let's see, if we want to start, I can tell you who, so we don't all do it at the same time. So Carlos, do you want to go first?
Carlos? Oh, okay. Okay, let's start with you, Eddie.
Carlos, are you there?
No, Carlos, I think.
Eddie, are you there?
Eddie. Okay.
Are you guys listening out there?
Victor, you start, Victor. You are the first one, Victor. Come on, Victor.
Okay, I'm gonna start. Well,
Okay.
the last thing, in the past, I was thinking more about my lesson plans, but I was not thinking about my students. Nowadays, I think more about my students and not about my lesson plans. So what should I do? What is more important? To think about the lesson plan or your students? So I think it should be a mixture, right? Like to plan according to your students. So that is one thing that I'm thinking about putting into practice this new year. Well, I'm gonna be teaching Access this level, and so let's see what happens.
Okay. And Ellie, is that Victor? Victor, and
Yeah.
How are you doing? Carson, how are you?
I'm great, sir. I'm great. I'm excited of being here with you. And I think I was like, from 1:30 getting ready to start this webinar. And so I'm so excited.
That's so great. So you'll get paid for an hour and a half then.
Franklin, please.
Okay, thank you, Victor.
Okay.
Who else is out there? Eddie, are you out there? Carlos, Amelia? We are briefly just introducing ourselves, but just sharing a bit of how we're doing and just checking in.
I'm doing fine, and you?
I'm good, Amelia. How are you? Amelia, were you part of the previous webinar?
No, I think this is the first that I've been participating
Well,
from the
welcome.
previous web. Yeah.
Well, it's great to have you here.
Thank you.
Let's see. Carlos and Eddie, you guys out there? Or in there?
Actually, you know what? I see Carlos and Eddie, and they are on a meeting right now. But I know Teacher Eddie, he opened his computer, and because he's the one who told me, like, and right now he's in a meeting.
Okay. Thank you, Amelia, for that information. Thank you. I appreciate that. Okay, so I guess we'll continue with who's joined so far then. Okay, let's continue then.
Okay.
Okay, so before we get started and share a little bit of the things I would like to talk about today, I'm really curious, and I know, Victor, you started talking about this a little bit. I'm really curious about, for you guys, when you've, in the past or currently, when you think of lesson planning, how do you normally approach it? Is there a process you go through? Are there any practices that you find effective with lesson planning? So based on the experiences that you have right now, which I know is a lot, what are some things that you do when lesson planning? What are some things you keep in mind, or you try to always remember to do when you're lesson planning? I'd like to hear a little bit about that, if possible. Victor or Amelia? Ellie, I see you're online now.
His
Over here.
Hi, Eddie. Hey,
Hi,
Eddie.
Ellie. How are you doing?
I'm good, and you?
We're really good. Great to have you with us. Okay. Anyone would like to share a little bit?
well, I guess that I can start.
Please. Thank you.
So regarding to your question, so what I usually do is that I try to keep in mind my syllabus and the resources that I have to teach, like the textbook. But I also take into account the fact that, like how my class is, like how the students are, so that I can actually meet the needs that they may have. Since the learning process for each student is different, and especially with access classes, we know that even though they're actually in the same level, within the class you will have different levels of speaking and the language understanding. So that's one thing that I do, and I try to make like a standard class so that I'm able to approach and to reach all those different levels that I have within my class. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Amelia, I hear that with the Access program, is there a specific type of lesson planning template that you have to use or format, or is that pretty flexible?
Actually, it's pretty flexible. I do my own, like especially like even it's I think Access is flexible. Senses they really trust that you're gonna do a really good job, and actually like the way I have worked, it actually works.
Mm,
Having that flexibility.
great. Thank you, Access, for trusting the teachers. Thank you, Amelia. Okay. Ellie or Victor, would you guys like to share a bit?
Okay, what I do, I have my own format. So as Amelia said, they are very flexible with us, so we can create our own format. And what I do is to check the book, the lesson that I'm going to teach. I check the objective I have to cover, and then I start thinking about the objective and then about the lesson that I'm going to teach. But I think the most important and what is effective is to think about the students you have, the kind of students you have. Because some of them are pretty fast, they learn really quick, but there are some others that they go slower. So you have to think about both of them, how to help them at the same time.
Mm, awesome. Thank you, Victor. And I hear both Victor and Amelia mentioning students as the most important thing, and that's definitely great to hear and a key thing, right? Because we're here for the students, and everything we try to do in design is hopefully in trying to serve their learning, and so that's great to hear. I don't know if Carlos, you want to, no, Eddie, you want to add anything else?
Oh, yes. Well, what about the lesson planning? Yeah, well, what I do is I always take into consideration the materials that I'm gonna use before planning because if I have the resources, I can prepare a better class. In some cases, we need to like improvise something else, and if we have the resources there in the classroom, it's better. And also, another thing is when we have to take into consideration of the process of planning. It's not just writing like lesson activities. So I am very careful with the activities. If what is the purpose of each activity? Is it they are going to be effective? What is going to be the, the effect on the students? It's not only just to do any activity. It's I have to choose the best activities for the students. That's what I do when I'm planning.
Thank you, Eddie. Yeah, one thing that you mentioned there, which I really liked hearing, was the word purpose. I personally find that, and for myself for many years, and observing teachers a lot too, I've noticed that oftentimes we do activities that we like or activities that students like, and sometimes it's not enough for someone just to like an activity. If we don't have an intention or purpose that's really supporting your decision of the activity, it's a little bit more difficult to find a certain outcome. Whereas if we are really clear on what activity I'm doing and why it is that I'm doing it, then it's a lot easier not only to find an outcome, but to guide students in understanding why it is that they're doing what they're doing and what they're building towards. So it's really important to have that purpose always in mind, to have a sense of intention in what we're doing. So thank you for sharing that, Eddie. I now see that we have a couple more people. Sara Colorado, are you there? Welcome if you're there. Sara, are you here? Okay, I hope you are. Okay, guys, let's continue. Let's move on to the next slide. Okay, so so we talked a little bit about what when we lesson plan, what kind of, what we think of, and definitely highlighting that students are the most important thing that we always keep in mind when lesson planning. Now, thinking a little bit more specifically in terms of the little details and logistics of lesson planning, I have another couple of questions for you all. And one is, what aspects or components or elements do you think are helpful to put in your lesson plan? So when you are lesson planning, some people might say, oh, I have objectives, or I'm going to decide what the teacher's going to do, what the students are going to do. What are some things that you find that are really essential in terms of writing and including in your lesson plan? And it might be, we don't have to give us a whole list, but maybe just share one or two things that you find are really important, and maybe a little bit about why. Who would like to share?
I would say the activities you plan, because sometimes maybe you have a lesson plan about the present perfect, and you can present the present perfect, you can give the rules, you can give the structure, and the students can practice on their books. But what activity you use to develop this topic? So for me, I think the activities you plan are really important to include.
And Victor, when you talk about including the activities, is there how do you normally decide what kind of activity you want? What do you think about?
It depends about the objective you want to reach. Like, for example, if I want my students to improve their writing, so I have to include activities to continue working with the writing process. If I want my students to speak more English, I have to include activities that develop the speaking skill.
Awesome. And so really making sure that the activities that we include in design are building towards an objective. Because sometimes we have like 6 activities and maybe 4 of them really help in terms of helping students meet the objectives. But then 2 might be nice, they might be okay, maybe even fun, but they don't necessarily build towards meeting that objective. Would you say that's important?
Yeah, it is like the PEPs. That's why the PEPs are like kind of curious now for me, because like they start building the skills the students must gain in the process.
Absolutely, yes. PEPs are important. Thank you.
I agree.
Who just said I agree? Is that you, Amelia?
Amelia, yeah.
Okay.
I think that after the training that we had on PEPs, that actually helped a lot, with executing better classes for our students, and how to become, more selective with the activities that you are going to use for a specific purpose. And my only, I will say, comment is that, and I agree with teacher Rizzo, perhaps not all PEPs are needed, or we don't need like a huge amount of PEPs or activities for a class. But I think that that's going to depend, you know, like on the topic, on the way you're going to deliver the class, and also on the way the students are. It's like if I have like a class that I know that they are fast learners and that they learn through images, I will try to, you know, create PEPs that will use more, you know, images. If the purpose is, you know, to get students to talk, and I know that I have a group that is really talkative, then I will use PEPs that will motivate or incentivize those kind of things. So I agree with teacher Victor.
Mhm. So here you're saying that really thinking about what kind of PEPs we, as teachers we can use in order to meet student needs and to meet things and really to think about things that they like and things that really help them, and then based on that include that in our lesson plans.
That's right.
Okay, thank you, Amelia. Eddie, anything else you'd like to share if you're out there?
Yes, this is about, I think the objectives are very important components of the lesson plan, because in that way we know where we want to go and what we need to get from students. Sometimes we want the students to speak, but we don't have the objective for that skill. So I think the objective is like it's the guide, so for teacher and also for students, and also the activities. If we have the correct activities for the objectives, we are gonna get the best result. And timing, I think timing is very important, because in that way we could know is we are giving the correct timing for each activity. Sometimes activity could fall apart because of timing. We do, if we don't consider timing, sometimes we can get a problem in the class.
So really thinking about how to distribute the time that you have. And oftentimes if you have like lots of hours of class, it's a little bit easier to be able to play with that. But sometimes we're really limited in the amount of time we have. So really learning how to distribute that time effectively so we can really help students. The other piece that you were mentioning, Eddie, I thought was really interesting, and we're going back to the idea of objectives. And there it reminded me of a quote that says something like, if you don't know where you're going, you might end somewhere else. And even though that might be actually really nice sometimes in life, or even in the classroom, sometimes that's really nice. But when we do really need to meet certain objectives, if we don't know where we're going, it's really hard to get there.
Yeah, yeah, you're right.
Okay, guys. If anyone else has added, before we move on to the next slide, if anyone else has joined in and would like to say hi, please do. Asada, I don't know if you're with us, but I see your name. Mila? Hi, Sada.
Hello.
How are you?
Hi, Maria. Doing well. And you?
We're good. We're happy to have you.
Hi. Thank you. Mama Bettina is also here. Hello, everyone.
Who is this, Mila?
Mila, hi. I'm sorry I'm late. I was in a meeting. Sorry.
No worries. Don't worry. We're happy to have you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So Mila and Sarah, since you're just joining us, we've gone through a couple of slides pretty much just talking about your own experiences with lesson planning. And we're going to now move into talking a little bit more about different components and elements that are helpful to think about when lesson planning. And I'm going to move into the next slide. So what you see, if you can see the slide, I hope you can, are a number of things. Some of these things you guys already mentioned as important things to keep in mind. I'd like for you to just to take about 20 seconds, 30 seconds, look at the slide and look at all the different components that I've included here, and think about which of these you definitely do, which of these you've been doing, and if there's maybe one or two that you feel like you might want to do more with, or something that really catches your attention. Take a look. Okay. So as you guys are looking at these, I don't want to necessarily go into all of these because some of them are pretty straightforward and self-explanatory. So I'm not going to sit here and talk about this for the next hour. But I do want to, so out of all of these, are there any that feel, besides the objectives and the ones that we've already talked about, any of these really speak to any of you right now? Or any of these feel really important to you? And or if you have any questions about any of these, you can ask too. Who would like to share? Go ahead.
For me,
Go ahead.
you
Oh,
have to take into account the learning style the students have, because in that is going to allow you to prepare your class or to plan your class in a good way, in a way that everybody understands what you are saying.
okay.
Yes,
Yes, who's this?
Victor.
Victor, go ahead.
No, I already said it.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Sorry, I thought that was Eddie. I'm so sorry. Thank you, Victor. Victor, and when you think about learning styles, and when you think about your lesson planning, how do you? Is there a way in which you normally include the learning styles? Like, do you write it out, or is it based on? Is it more about the activities and having varied activities? How do you normally see it in your lesson plan?
Well, sometimes when you are planning the activities you include like different teaching styles too, right? Like you start thinking about pictures, or to have the students describing pictures, or you start thinking about the some students are work with structure so easy that you prefer to explain your lesson by giving structures. So everything is going to depend on the students or objective you are trying to reach.
Okay. Thank you, Victor. Thank you very much.
I think that another important thing that we have to take into account is the teacher actions, because we are an important component in the class, as we are the instructor. Students, sometimes they even follow our attitudes, our expectations. So it's very important that we have like clear objectives of ourselves and the way we evaluate ourselves. And one important thing that I do feel that, especially in my case, I need like more guidance is on how to give instructions to my students, because sometimes it's very difficult to address or to talk to so many kids who have different levels in the language and make sure that everyone perceive the instructions the way you expected. So that's my point of view on that
Thank
matter.
yes. Thank you, Amelia. Amelia, and one thing that I agree with you very much, and I think it's also really important to keep in mind the teacher actions, because I think when we do it, when we're lesson planning, if we really are aware of what, as a teacher, I'm going to say or I'm going to do, it really helps us in the classroom to be able to minimize the amount of language we use in terms of talking too much or taking over the class, or and sometimes if we don't have really clear, we don't have lots of clarity on what we want to say and how we're going to say it, it can easily become us mumbling for like 2, 3, 4 minutes. And sometimes with low beginners and you know, with low beginners, the less language you use oftentimes when given instructions, the better for them, right? So if we're really clear when we're lesson planning on what I'm going to do as a teacher, what I'm going to say, and how I'm going to say it, then it makes it a lot easier when we're in the classroom. And the same goes for student actions. If I really know what I want them to do and what I'm going to ask them to do, it'll be easier for me to be able to give those instructions. And a lot of it comes with preparing that beforehand. Even for very experienced teachers, if for like once a week you sit down and say, okay, for 2 of my most, I guess, complex activities of the class, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to write out what I'm going to do, what I'm going to say, what the students are going to do, what they're going to say, then over time that becomes a lot more automatic. But it really does take the practice and time of planning that beforehand before it does become automatic.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Amelia. Thank you for sharing. Anyone else out there would like to share their thoughts on any of the components that's on this slide?
Yes, I would like to say about assumption for what the student already know. It's very important that teachers make sure that what the student really know. And if we assume that they know something and at the end they don't know, it causes a problem with students. So during the lesson planning, we should consider that part of learning. Sometimes students know about the topic, but sometimes we are assuming that they know. We should make sure before assuming that they really know.
Ooh. So hopefully before making wild assumptions, we could do some sort of student, like a diagnostic type of assessment where we get to see what they know, what they don't know. I've seen lots of people, teachers in their lesson plans at the end of a lesson, almost like the beginning of the following lesson, do some sort of pre-assessment of what they want to teach the next class so that they have a better idea of what they're, what might happen. And so it's something that can be really, if we make these huge assumptions that are not accurate, it could be a big challenge. I also find that sometimes if we haven't been able to self-assess the students, sometimes we have to make certain assumptions in order to start somewhere, right? So it's something important, I think, to keep in mind. But like you're saying, that was Ellie, right?
Yep.
Like you were saying, Ellie, I think it's really important not to make